This presentation is for Political Science 202 with Barry Maxwell. Human trafficking is the illegal moving of people for profit by coercion, force, or threats, usually for forced labor or the sex trade, but it also includes the illegal drug industry, domestic servants, and agricultural workers. Human trafficking is a large issue internationally and in the United States. These statistics from the National Human Trafficking Resource Center show the huge volume of reported human trafficking incidents in just a short period of time. These statistics obviously don't take into account the cases that go undetected. Those who are also excluded from these statistics include foreign nationals from countries that have an inherent distrust of law enforcement. These individuals are often found working in agricultural jobs, putting in very long hours, receiving pay far below minimum wage, and substandard housing, with no knowledge that they are entitled to better treatment. This Department of Justice image gives an overview of the widespread national issue of sex trafficking alone. There are a number of agencies combating the problem. On a national level, the U.S. Department of Justice has increased human traffic prevention resources. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is working with adjoining states to identify known routes and areas that individuals are being trafficked through. Washington State has a task force through the Attorney General's office comprised of legislatures, law enforcement, and social service leaders. Notice in the image that Seattle is in one of the top 20 states identified as a human trafficking jurisdiction in our country. Proposed improvement is to create a task force in Washington that includes hotel owners and employees, restaurant owners and employees, agricultural employers, strip club owners and employees, as well as nail and massage schools. Creating a task force that adds these roles will increase the perspective from the areas where trafficking is occurring the most. Including business owners in this task force will help identify areas where the resources are needed most and where the victims are most likely to go unnoticed by the law enforcement. Partnering up law enforcement and legislatures with those working in the areas that human traffic is occurring gives both sides an additional perspective, as well as increasing training potential and awareness. You may be wondering why those previous industries were mentioned. Hotels are one of the #1 places that pimps book rooms for weekends, running customers in and out of the same room, or they will book a hotel room as a base for several girls to come and get cleaned up in between customers. Putting a hotel owner in this task force and training their employees on what to look for puts them on the front lines of identification where girls who are being trafficked would otherwise go unnoticed. The same is often true with restaurants. They are arranged as meeting places or quick meals for girls in between customers. Often, agriculture employers have a language barrier with the employees that they hire, and a translator, who is often their trafficker, comes along with a group of new or seasonal employees. This individual often skims wages and uses fear to prevent these victims from seeking help. Nail salons and relaxation massage studios are often legal storefronts to hide underage workers and illegal sex acts in the back. Those being trafficked in nail salons are often underage and not US born. And again, these legitimate businesses offer excellent cover-ups. One thing about strip clubs is that they are often the gateway for prostitution and other girl or female exploitation acts. Strip club owners may be the front lines in prohibiting further exploitation of girls. How this task force would work is the state would be divided into 6 individual task forces encompassing approximately a sixth of the state in geographical area. The idea behind dividing them up this way is that each area has its own unique challenges. For instance, border towns and counties experience more international trafficking issues. Those along the I-5 corridor see more sex trafficking through the adjacent large cities, truck routes, and those with large amounts of agricultural work see higher instances of forced labor and traffic persons into coerced labor. The task force would need additional legislative funding from the Crime Prevention Fund. This would provide a meeting space 3 times a year for each of the 6 groups to convene, as well as cover lodging and lost wages, so the individuals would be willing to dedicate time to the cause. This would provide an incentive for participation as well as mitigate a financial burden on the individuals. The idea behind including training materials and supplies is twofold. First, collaboratively, law enforcement, private individuals, and legislatures would build training materials to increase the diversity of knowledge among themselves and then amongst each of the 6 task forces. Second, collaboratively, they would develop a training manual for those in the mentioned industries who aren't part of the task force but could be excellent frontline resources in combating the issue. These training materials could be distributed widely and easily. In addition to the 3 times a year meetings of the 6 individual task forces, they would all convene annually with the appropriate legislatures, state attorney generals, and law enforcement officials to go over what they have learned throughout the year, share resources, and determine where more are needed. The topic of political support isn't in question. There is an increasing amount of attention being given to this issue through domestic funding as well as international funding. The U.S. Department of Justice has a coalition that includes the Department of Health and Human Services, Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as well as the State Task Force Roundtable sponsored by the State Attorney General's Office. There is a widespread support for continuing an additional effort to stop this problem. Capturing those who are responsible for trafficking saves tax dollars and precious law enforcement hours in the long run. One example of expenditure is in fiscal year 2003, the U.S. government spent about $91 million on anti-trafficking programs. This is a strong demonstration of current political support, and the proposed task force would be a much smaller impact. For additional sources and works cited, please see the reference section of the attached paper. Thank you.